Ya. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Terima kasih. Welcome to the iNation Global Summit 2025 Tech Talk. What went wrong with the GII? Tech that's getting it right. Bersama dengan saya KJ.
Dan saya Shahril Hamdan.
As you know, we run the podcast Keluar Sekejap, but we also do events like this.
Although this is the first time we've been back in this building for a while together.
Oh yeah. I think I came for we've been here for talks.
Yeah. But not like this, not. Dah lama tak bagi ucapan kat bangunan ni.
Yeah, betul. Anyway, moving on. Thank you very much to Datuk Dr. Rais Hussein, CEO of Meranti, Professor Yasmin, Chairman of Meranti, leadership of MOSTI, Puan Ruziah, Timbalan KSU. When I was at MOSTI, Puan Ruziah was SUB. Happy to see her as TKSU now. We're going to talk today about the GII and also what we're doing right and what we can do better in Malaysia. Now, for the context of our discussion hari ini, of course, I'm speaking not just as a podcaster, but as somebody who served at MOSTI before. Shahril is speaking also as somebody who is involved in investments now, and he does look at technology companies as well. So he's had some exposure to emerging tech companies and how they are finding the challenges of raising capital in expansion. And of course, later we have one of our guests we will introduce later, who is one of the success stories of the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. So we're going to start with just a back and forth between Shahril and myself, and then we will introduce our guest to share what he got right and what we got right in Malaysia and what we can do better. But I think the first thing that we want to talk about is Malaysia's kedudukan kita lah dalam Global Innovation Index. So the GII is published annually by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and it measures a country's innovation capacity and output across various sectors of the economy. Malaysia's position has fluctuated, and in some years it's declined since our peak performance in the mid-2010s, where we were 33rd out of 133 countries in the 2024 Global Innovation Index. I wanted to maybe start by asking Shahril his perspective as somebody involved in the capital raising side of things nowadays, as to why he thinks Malaysia fluctuates when it comes to innovation. Of course, the context of this is low GRD. Our gross expenditure on R&D is still less than 1%, 0.5%, although we have aspirations to take this up to 3% by 2030. Korea spends almost 5%. Lack of talent, the valley of death, where a lot of companies get grants to start up, but they can't accelerate and they can't commercialize fast enough and raise money fast enough before they end up dying. And also this focus on process innovation. So a lot of companies, especially SMEs, and even bigger companies, they spend money on process innovation, IT systems and things like that, to make themselves more efficient, but they don't really spend money on product innovation, which is the real crux of what they are trying to sell. So maybe, Shahril, you want to weigh in on your views about the capital side of things and what you're seeing as missing in Malaysia.
Yeah, terima kasih KJ. I think just to add on what you said before I give a view around the capital raising side or the funding side of this question. I think the term you used was the value of death, which is this commercialization or lack of. That seems to be what is also driving this ranking, this fluctuation in ranking. Because I read, as we're doing research for preparation for this session, apparently Malaysia does fairly well when it comes to the input variables. So that's not the biggest challenge. But the challenge is the output variables. So commercialization, being able to move from whatever research or product that is in the lab or in universities. There are challenges there as well, but in as much as those things exist, getting them to commercial level has been apparently a perennial challenge in this country. But I wanted to add to all those different factors I think KJ had already elucidated, to just add three things around funding and capital. I think number satu is the lack of, the absence of growth investing or growth investors. Dekat Malaysia ni, with great agencies like Meranti, like Cradle, like all these other government entities or GLIC or GLICs, there is not necessarily an abundance, but there is adequate, arguably. I would argue there's adequate early stage funding for many of the startups. So the soft capital, the early capital, the seed capital, startup founders will say, we wish there was more, but I think that's not the biggest gap. The gap is like, how do you get from not 0 to 50 employees, but 0 to like, or 50 to 1,000 employees? If you put AI aside and labor productivity, just use that as a metric, right? And that is where I think growth investing has been a bit of a gap in the Malaysia cycle. And what happens is that startup founders get to a certain level where they've proven a business model, maybe about to internationalize, and that's where there's a gap in funding. And of course, as you grow companies, and I guess for us, we can speak somewhat credibly given that we are also a bit of startup founders at Keluar Sekejap Sendian Berhad, which is a proper company. But me as an investor in tech these days, that's where when we speak to founders, and I have a lot of respect for founders, they tell us that the challenge is we need to keep growing. And when we need to keep growing, the lack of funding gives us only a few options. One is you grow more slowly, which is not very exciting. You use whatever profits you have, if you are profitable, to fund the growth. Second is you go to banks for financing, which is especially hard if you are not profitable. And many of these sort of growth stage companies are not meant to be profitable. You need them to grow fast. Third, you maybe have to sell early. And that's where also sayang lah, because you are selling way lower than the potential value of your company if you were able to lead it for longer. Or fourth, you go bust or you go bankrupt, which is obviously the least favored outcome. So these are some of the real implications when there isn't adequate growth funding. So I think there's a gap there that we can talk about later. Second issue is related, is around lack of exits. So when there's lack of exits and companies don't get sold or IPO, then there's a lack of recycling of capital. IPO markets in this region is particularly tough for tech companies. And let's talk to some founders later about how true that is. But I think that is a particularly problematic issue around not just Malaysia, but Southeast Asia. Our IPO markets are not, and our investor base are not that familiar with tech companies who want to go for listing. So if IPO markets are not the most obvious or the easiest way to get liquidity or to exit, then your other exit path is M&A. And M&A, who's going to buy your companies? Who's going to acquire your companies? Maybe your local champion, your legacy, big companies that are on a bursa index. Itu pun tak banyak sangat yang ada appetite untuk acquire. What the dream is for the founder in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia is, how do I get acquired by Chinese companies, by American companies, by European companies, the trade buyers? And there, I think the relationship has to be built more strongly so that our founders who get to that point where they are ready to exit also get buy-side interests and knowledge from them, from the buy-side, about what this region is. So I work for a European growth investor. And many of our colleagues in the ecosystem in Europe don't fully appreciate how attractive not only Southeast Asia is, but particularly Malaysia is. And when they look closer, they'll be like, oh, there are these companies that are coming out of Malaysia. Why didn't we know that before? And so a role that someone like me plays is trying to introduce and facilitate. But the point here is broader, right? The point is, how come they don't know? And why don't they know that there are attractive companies here that can be acquired and can be absorbed into their larger ecosystem? And thirdly, very quickly, when you have lack of exits, you don't have a recycling, not just of capital, but of knowledge. when founders exit their businesses, especially tech founders, when they exit, not only do they get rich and happy and maybe they reinvest as angel investors, but they are also filled with knowledge that they're usually more than happy to share with other founders, or they can found their second or third company. And that's a cycle that Malaysia belum lagi sampai, and that's what we'd like to see change, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, KJ.
Yeah, thanks, Shahril, for giving an overview about the funding side and the challenges around exits and how startup founders find it difficult to scale up beyond the initial startup phase. We were asked to talk about policy. I think, as with anything in Malaysia, policy dah okay dah. I was asked to, when I was at MOSTI, to prepare the Dasar Science, Technology dan Inovasi Negara. We worked together with Academy Science Malaysia. MOSTI prepared a blueprint, and I think Dato' Rais is familiar with this. I think we get everything right on paper. It's just that when we implement it, that's really where the challenges are. So I wanted to share with you, Shahril, also love to hear your views on this. The challenges that I faced when I went to MOSTI. I went to MOSTI in March 2020. So I went, I think 3 or 4 days before lockdown, before PKP. And when I got to MOSTI, I found a very, very fragmented ministry. As in, the governance of technology innovation in Malaysia was left over the years to become fragmented into many, many agencies. And on my desk, I remember, was a report prepared by PwC, if I'm not mistaken, for the previous minister, Yang Muhammad Yobiin, about how to rationalize and consolidate the agencies under MOSTI. I remember, for instance, when it comes to funding, there were 3 different major agencies. There was Cradle, there was Malaysian Debt Ventures, there was MAVCAP, each with different mandates, not similar, granted. And when it came to incubation, when it came to technology development, there was MTDC, there was TPM, there was Magic to some extent, and then there were smaller things like Platform Ventures and things like that. A really, really a labyrinth of bureaucracy, basically. And when you have a labyrinth of bureaucracy, especially in governments are, I'm sorry to say, there are a lot of government officers here today, governments tend to love silos. Maknanya dia suka tembok lah. Dia suka tembok, okay, this is my. The only time we successfully runtuhkan tembok was when I ran COVID task force. Because I just took a sledgehammer and whacked all the walls, and we were able to do it because we were in a crisis, pandemic. We had to get out of it. But in peacetime, you're going to have these silos. So I tried my best to try to rationalize as many of these agencies as possible. So the one that I got to do in 1.5 years that I was at MOSTI was the host of our program today, which is Meranti. Meranti essentially amalgamated Magic and Technology Park Malaysia. Basically, in my mind, it was combining the hardware of a technology and innovation and science park with the software of Magic's accelerator program, Magic's handholding of startups, global accelerator program, to make sure that you had both the software and also the hardware of having a physical space. The other thing that I wanted to do was to also rationalize the technology acceleration part of MOSTI, which is exactly what you mentioned just now, Valley of Death, tak boleh nak scale up and all those sorts of things. And that's why I tried to shortcut it, because nak consolidate agency ni susah. Because there are a lot of people jaga turf and all these things, because at the end of the day, it's about jobs, it's about jawatan, it's about your budget and things like that. I'm very mindful of that as a politician or as an ex-politician. But I thought I could shortcut it by creating the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. So we came up with that idea together with Zulira at that point at Magic. So we brought it to the National Economic Council. So we said, can we shortcut this process by creating this NTIS, slightly different from the sandbox that Bank Negara runs, for instance, because this is more based on technology and companies based on technology rather than fintech. And see whether or not we can match it with the grants that can be given by MTDC, because I noticed that MTDC dapat peruntukan daripada DE every year. So I said rather than collapsing the agencies together, maybe get everyone to play nice within a national government program. And then I was explaining to Dr. Rais and Professor just now, we had the impetus to do it then because it was COVID. So we thought the world was going to end. And we thought that, we would be locked up forever. So I went to PM and I said, let's automate as many things as possible. We can't rely on foreign workers anymore. Let's get drones into the palm oil estates. Let's back companies that can automate agriculture, that can automate manufacturing, that can automate everything single thing that we can think of. And we threw the challenge out there to companies to see whether or not they would come into the sandbox and basically graduate from the sandbox. And later we'll hear an experience, I think, from one of the more successful stories of the sandbox. So that was the ecosystem where I faced as Minister of MOSTI. And unfortunately, I don't think this fragmented system has been addressed. So, and I'll be very open and frank here, you have at least 3 or 4 different ministries doing technology now. You have MOSTI, you have Ministry of Digital, sounds grammatically weird. You have Ministry of Communications. And yes, they all do work together, but when it's under different ministers and ministries, it becomes very difficult. And it's a scattergun approach. It's not a single punch that you are trying to achieve. Many different people looking after many different things. MOSTI, I found, and this is an honest reflection from me, is at most an afterthought for many, many big decisions that are made by government. I mean, when I was there, I was forceful in a sense that I put myself in the conversation. If you don't have people or ministers who are forceful enough to put MOSTI in the conversation, then it doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen. It's seen as a ministry that is not integral to the future economic development of the country. That's why we came up with Science, Technology, Innovation and Economic Development, STIE. We tagged along economic development because we said, if you're going to see the economic growth of this country being powered by technology and innovation, these people, MOSTI, and this ecosystem must be part of the conversation. Kalau tak part of the conversation, then forget it lah. And the last part that I wanted to touch on is that because it's fragmented, because MOSTI sometimes is not seen as a heavyweight ministry, the outcome of things like the NTIS is not, dia tak ada sambutan from the other parts of government. And I'll give you an example. And we'll ask later whether this is true or not. I said, kalau kita nak buat semua sandbox, kalau kita nak bagi grant, cradle grant, and then later on we give a loan through MDV, and then later on we're going to convince GPs through MAVCAP to invest in a company. Katalah company A ni, dia successful. Dia start up, dulu dapat duit daripada cradle, start. Lepas tu dia dapat pinjaman daripada MDV. Lepas tu dapat investment daripada MAVCAP. They went through the whole cycle, right? But if that particular company that's been validated by MOSTI agencies, but still cannot even get government procurement success, meaning the government procurement, kita dah minta dah. Can you give preference to locally developed startup technology companies? MOF will say yes, no problem. But at the end of the day, of course, that's not the reality. And some other countries have a policy to actually mandate the procurement agency, in most cases their Ministry of Finance, to actually award contracts and procurement to local technology startups and technology companies. So, Shahril, those are the problems that I face from a governance perspective.
I think that's really helpful for somebody who's been in the system and led this ministry to give us a view of where you thought the gaps were and the attempts to make it better and where you think there's still a way to go. I would just want to pick up on your last point because I think that's extremely illuminating. Ramai orang anggap bahawa peranan kerajaan bila hal, pelaburan teknologi ni is just to fund. And I think, of course, funding is a key piece. But 2 points. Point 1 is, like I elucidated earlier, funding from government usually is the early fund lah. You can't keep expecting government to keep funding throughout the company's life cycle. So there's that gap that government cannot and maybe should not be fixing. Sampai bila government nak keep investing in your company. But the bigger problem that maybe I want to spend a couple of minutes on is that piece that KJ said at the end, the role of government is to be customers to the best tech companies or the best solutions that come out from your own country. Because that in many ways is more valuable than startup capital. Especially when more and more of this VCPE space gets filled and there are GPs, managers, funds who are able to fund without using the government coffers, that becomes less and less of the play. The play here is how do we get validity, credibility, and oftentimes when, go back to what I said in my first answer, when founders and companies go and raise or want to go and internationalize, the question that they get from potential investors or other customers is, where are your customers from your home country? Have you proven your technology? Normal lah, because if you are an investor, you're not going to take over the company, right? You are a minority investor. You need all of these sort of checkbox ticked. And if the founder that comes from, say, Malaysia can't prove or can't show that their own government or their own sort of ecosystem is backing them, not just in funding, but in customer, in picking up their product or in solution, then it is a problem for how international ecosystem players would view that company. And KJ is absolutely right. There are various examples where other regions and other places are already doing this. So the US, for example, in Europe, there's loads of examples where governments are not only mandated, but it's just a point of pride that if you can get the same solution or often better solution than just importing technology, why should you not favor your own technology in terms of your procurement? And government should be the one taking that risk there, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of validating the local sort of solution, right? So I think that's absolutely key. That's often overlooked because it's not a news item. News item ni berapa billion yang dibelanjakan dalam budget kepada startup. Itu yang boleh jadi news item. Tapi actually more important than that, I will argue, is government supporting local companies and local solutions by validating and taking them on.
But also not just government, Shahril. Also big companies, listed companies, GLCs, they have a role as well. If you talk about technology and innovation R&D, kita ambil contoh US lah. You know, there's this famous analysis done by Professor Maria Mazzucato about the iPhone. Most of the key technology in the iPhone is not developed by Apple. It's developed by government agencies in the US, like DARPA, the Defense Research Agency in the Department of Defense, NASA, touchscreen, Siri. These are developed by government taxpayers' money in research that was done in the 60s and 70s. But it was disambut oleh big technology companies and developed and repurposed into smartphones and things like that. So I think, yes, we can point the finger at government, but I think it's also important that bigger companies, those who are endowed with deep pockets, especially GLCs, also play their role in allowing these solutions to be deployed.
I think absolutely right. That's a fair point. And I wanted to expand a bit our discussion here so that we also because there is a question of balancing between importing tech and indigenous tech. What we've been talking the last few minutes is where the tech is ready, the product is ready, and I think we're going to speak to someone where there is such example. Then you should always favor your local. But as you get there, there are a few steps that we need to be brave and bold about. And that means where there is gaps in technology solutions, finding creative ways of getting international companies to set up shop here, hire Malaysians here, and that's where your traditional tech transfer happens. So I think there needs to be more effort in doing so. Second point is around the R&D expenditure, which we touched very briefly on in our intro, KJ, and I think that's clearly not enough, and maybe that's a broader conversation we can continue after this. Thirdly is we talk about local supporting local. There's a slight counter here where nuance is required. And I think one of the components or the ingredients that we need to also speak about is global ambition. Global ambition. And global ambition exists among pockets of our founders here, but there's also some, perhaps, comfort in just building a business that is local and becoming a local champion. And I like to think that there is enough talent in this country, and with the right support, to start thinking regional or thinking global from day one. Because we are not Indonesia. We don't have a consumer market of 300 million people where you can build a really big company just by thinking local. And we are not so small like Singapore, where immediately it's obvious you have to think global. We are in this middle ground, KJ, and I think sometimes we get trapped in this middle nila. Because we have a population sizable enough that you can have a good living. You can make a good living just being local. But that does not fulfill the potential of the solution or the software or the product that you're making. So I think there's also a role of ecosystem players, whether it's GLCs, whether it's government, to always encourage our companies to think global from day one. Because yesterday I was a part of this mega trends forum in Kazana, and then we look at all these other ecosystems, countries that are small. The favorite example people use is Sweden, right? Sweden is what, 10 million people? And Sweden comes up with Spotify, Sweden comes up with Lovable, Sweden comes up with all these really global companies that are worth billions. And Malaysia, there's no reason that we can't, but ambition is another thing that we need to push.
Yeah, and later we'll hear again from our guest who has no choice but to go regional, partly because no love here. But before we get there, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about the NTIS, the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. So the sandbox is actually guided. It's not just it is open to people to apply to. This is what I remember of the sandbox. I don't know if things have changed since I left MOSTI, but it was guided in a sense that we would inspire people by giving problem statements. That's how it started. So I spent a lot of time with the team at the sandbox and the team at MOSTI thinking about what our problem statements were as a country, and then throwing it to innovators and startups and saying, can you solve this problem? I think that was part of the excitement in NTIS, because there was a sense of mission. Oh, we're going to solve this problem for the country. So some of the problems that we had were, for instance, over-reliance on foreign workers. So we had so many drone companies, I can't remember how many drone companies came in during the sandbox scan, who came in with ideas on topography mapping of palm oil estates, oil palm estates, fertilization or fertilizer spraying of oil palm estates. I even had one guy coming to see me. I don't think he ended up making it to the sandbox, of developing a drone with laser cutting technology, so you don't have to physically go and cut the fresh fruit bunch. But that was probably the guy was probably way ahead of his time lah. Bahaya sangat kan, to end up the laser cutting people and stuff like that. And then the other thing we imagined was how, and this was in 2020, long before LLMs burst on the scene, how AI can be quickly and rapidly deployed in medical contexts. For instance, the most overused and over-mentioned use case scenario to help with radiology, to help with quickly reading X-rays and MRIs. So this is happening now. Other things that we thought about was to do with security. So for instance, I remember, and again, I could not understand the lack of urgency. And you know this company well, Shahril, Aerodyne. So Aerodyne, when I was in MOSTI, was the top 3 drone company in the world. And just to correct things, perception, they don't make drones. Aerodyne makes the brains of the drone. So they make the software so that the drone knows what to do. Number 3, and I think now they're number 2 in the world in software for drones. And we had a big problem with smuggling at the borders. So I asked Kamaru, I said, hey, can you come up with a swarm of drones? This is 2020, before drone technology has reached what it is today. Can you create a swarm of drones with nesting capabilities across our northern border, not to replace the border force, but to augment the border force? Border forces are slow to deploy because they're people in vehicles. They don't know where to go. But if they have eyes in the sky, then they can go quickly to where the smuggling is taking place. Tried to convene a meeting with KDN, with MOF, so difficult. Eventually people came, but people who came to the meeting weren't the people who were going to make the decisions. So I mean, I wanted to share this frustration because, you know, if you're going to double down on something, give one of your companies, which was already a global company, the opportunity to augment our physical border force by solving a problem which is billions of ringgit of smuggling every year across the northern border with Thailand, and still I couldn't get the seriousness from people. And later we'll hear somebody who solved the problem statement, saying that there's too much smuggling through our ports and through our airports potentially, which results in billions of ringgit of losses in terms of excise and customs duty. So, you know, I just wanted to share with you that was a use case that I thought we could solve, that I wanted to solve, that, you know, I couldn't cross the line with it when it was so obvious that we had the technology and capability to do so.
Can I ask you, KJ, because I think your past two answers express your slight frustration about how glacial some of these movements are within government, and being obviously respectful to the audience here. But just generally speaking, can we deep dive a bit about this question of culture? You know, you mentioned about the fragmentation of agencies, the fact that multiple ministries oversee this question of tech. There's an argument that tech is such a big sort of driver of growth. And with AI, it is probably a horizontal play as opposed to one vertical ministry. But beyond this question of how you manage ministries and agencies, is there fundamentally a question of the lack of desire to lean into technology within government? As in, you know, maybe part of bureaucracy is just risk averse. It's not part of my job to take big risks. I don't get fired if I just do the normal thing, but I might get fired if I make a risk or take a bet on something that turns out to be. Is that what is in the problem here?
Partly, but I think I know what the fundamental problem is, but I'm not going to say it because I'm here at the invitation of a government agency. I think you guys also know what I'm trying to imply also. I mean, these things involve procurement of systems which are worth millions, if not billions, right? So I'm not saying that I'm not implying anything untoward, but there's a tendency to want to own that entirely and not want to look across the spectrum of agencies who are developing it. I mean, I think that's also part of the reason. But I think it's a good time for us to introduce our guest because he's been through this. He got his break in the sandbox when I was there in 2020. And one of our success stories now. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Mr. Lee Eugene, who is the general manager of Billion Prima Sdn Berhad. Is Billion Prima Sdn Berhad worth $1 billion yet?
Soon.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you have this MyScan cargo inspection system that exemplifies our tech that's getting it right. So, Mr. Lee, maybe share with us your journey in NTIS initially, and then later we'll talk about the challenges that you face now. How did you start in NTIS?
Okay, thank you, KJ, Cheryl, and also the Mosti and Meranti, having me an opportunity to sit here and share my journey, my story to you guys. Talk about the NTIS, right? I think that is under during KJ time, started in Mosti time, COVID time. So I was the first batch people to apply the application. And then when the time we apply, I was so excited that I received the call from all the agencies that what you mentioned, like Meranti or they call, and then successfully we getting the opportunity to start the testing. So my product is actually doing the scanning to control the border using the X-ray technology. So we are the very unique and special company in the Southeast Asia. And then I'm proud to say that we are the only one design center and manufacturer in the Southeast Asia region as well. So when the time we started this, actually want to just to tell the government that Malaysia have the talent, capability, and the technology to build and do everything by our own, so that we can control and manage our border security by our national technology. So this is the thing how we started lah, how we started the thing. So along the time, we also face a lot of challenges also. I think that we'll talk about later. So this the NTIS actually enable us having a very very good platform for us to start. And then that is one of the first step. I step out from the region and I go to the neighboring country of the Southeast Asia. And then also I just got a call from the other Southeast Asia country that I have an opportunity to brief the direct end user, I mean the custom department. So hopefully I may also bring in another more commercialization to the Malaysia, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, before we talk about the challenges, two things. Can you maybe explain your product again and so
Okay.
that people, and secondly, your experience in the sandbox, how did it actually help you get to where you are today and becoming international?
All right. Okay. So I come again. So my product applied to sample is actually the cargo X-ray scanner. So you imagine, right? Malaysia also is the first country that implement the 100% container scanning. So how do you scan? So you need to use the X-ray to scan the the container inside. So without scanning, you don't know what other thing inside. So people can try to evade the text lah, or they put something, the contraband or whatever inside. So by using the X-ray, our technology, we are able to help the government and the custom department to so-called to sort out the suspicious and abnormality of the scanner and then report. So this will actually protect our border as well. So this is mainly our product. So then this, I come to the next one, is actually how the NDIS enable us. The NDIS also need us to have a test platform with the Malaysia Custom Department. So they also trying allow us to keep on update our system. That is the thing that how we able to sell to the overseas market.
I'm going to ask the sensitive question here. So, I don't really see your scanners in Malaysia.
Yes, I have.
You have
Yes, I have.
a lot.
Cargo scanner, I think half of it. Yes.
Half of it.
No, the other half is other country one.
Why are you not getting all?
I hope to get all. Sensitive. But I believe that in the upcoming tender, I think the mostly and also doing the very hard work, as you mentioned, in the policy driven of the thing. So I believe in the upcoming one, I will have the chance. I will have the chance to supply more.
You are also supplying to neighboring countries. I can
Yes.
mention you're supplying to Indonesia.
Yes.
There's an expression of interest from another ASEAN country that you're going to. Your biggest competitor would be technology coming from China, I
Yes.
guess. How do you stay competitive? Because I think a lot of startup and technology companies are concerned because China makes things cheaper, they make things faster, and they make things even better now. How are you keeping up with the competition from China?
Okay. First, KJ, thanks for the thing. You are mentioned a very good point. So every time, when you talk about the China thing, you think about the first mindset. They are cheap, correct? No one can deny they're really cheap. But actually, you don't. Our Malaysia technology now, okay, the whole system, we are building not only the software, we build until the PCB component level already. That's the thing that why we can make our product is very competitive in terms of price to the China product as well. So if let's say for the upcoming like the other startup or innovator, they need to think about how they move lah. So for us, how we keep competitive is we not only deep dive into every component to be achieved like made in and also made by Malaysia. So to reduce the cost, and then that also will increase our so-called intellectual property. Then we can make and insert a very special, unique selling point into our product so that we can become the unique to my competitors. So now we do found a lot of patent. Actually, my company already found more than 60 patents around the world. So for the Malaysia alone, already granted almost 9 patents. Among 9, we also granted the patent from US and also the Indonesia currently. Yeah, so the other, like the European one, is actually pending because every patent, we need to wait for at least 2 years to be granted.
That's great news. That's great measure of success. Um, my question is really around, since you mentioned patents overseas. I wonder whether it is relevant, but because you are doing a solution that your competitor could be from China, with geopolitics these days, are you thinking, maybe not now, but later on down the line, going for countries where maybe for political reasons they do not want to take Chinese products, and maybe that's where your growth market is?
Yes, exactly. You are right, Shahril. So currently, for us, in terms of the price and technology, we are not like losing. We are not at the losing side. In fact, actually, China competitors are more affecting us. I mean, the Malaysia company like us, because first we can fight the pricing with them. Secondly, we are very, how do I say, flexible in terms of adding all the feature, everything. So right now, my next targeting country is the one that they are not really pro to the China.
In ASEAN lah,
Yes, in ASEAN,
a
and
bit on
then
the east lah.
yeah,
Okay.
and then now that is the geopolitics in the future. You see, I think in the future will be the two world. Either you want to side the US or Western, or the other one is to pro the China. Right now, Malaysia is a very good company in the middle. We are like the neutral to everybody. So we are also offering our thing. So you take the US one, too expensive. But if let's say you don't want like the China, then we are the beneficial one in the future. So this is how we position here.
So you would consider also the Western markets?
Yes, correct. I'm targeting next year. I will take my whole product to the international the security expo, so that I want to make a shout to the world that Malaysia start to have this kind of technology.
No need wait next year. Dr. Rice, when Donald Trump is here, please introduce him to Donald Trump. We can sell his his scans to the US. Mr. Lee, I wanted to ask you because now, obviously, from when you started in 2020 till now, the development of AI technology has been exponential.
Yes, yes, yes.
How are you integrating AI into your product? And can you explain to us, because a lot of us we're not involved in this field. So how has AI enhanced your scanning technology and machines?
Okay, yes, correct. Thanks, KJ. I think this is also one of our unique selling point currently. And then, in fact, we also found at least 4 to 5 patents regarding the AI now. So for us, number one, I think everyone know the AI. So just to the layman term, when the time you talk about the X-ray, it's just the normal X-ray like what you see the body, right? So you imagine the same thing that you see in the airport, the baggage also the X-ray. So the first level of the AI is actually to identify any contraband or some prohibited item inside the bag or container. This is a level 1 only. So I think we are not stopping here. So we invest a lot of the AI talent, and then actually last year, my company also sponsored 1.3 million to the UTM, Faculty of AI, actually. So we also work very closely with the UTM to keep on continue the AI development. So now we also adapt, the next level in the AI is something like the generative AI. So we need to make the official, or I mean the pegawai, to have the very effective way to generate the report, because somehow like I think why you are the ex-minister as well, suddenly you call the pegawai, I need the report very fast. So how you do it? You do it yourself. So you need to use the AI, something like the GPT level, ChatGPT, to help you to generate the report. So this is my next target, to implement this to help the government.
How's your funding journey like? Just to share, whatever you can share.
Okay, thanks. This is also a very tough question. So currently our fund, when the time you first sharing, you touched my heart. Our company, luckily, we still consider at the profit side. So we are forced to keep on develop our product by using our profit plus the loan from the bank as well. So for a lot of the company like us, instead of the funding, we actually prefer the so-called the project, the sales. Otherwise, you only give the fund, as I think you were sharing before. You don't know when the government will stop supporting you by the fund. If let's say you, like our Chinese always saying, you need to teach your people to fishing instead of you feed them the fish. So the feeding is something like this. So that is the the thing we currently still using our own fund.
But do you wish you had external funding so you can grow faster, internationalize before competitors come and eat your lunch?
We also welcome. We also welcome because currently, for your information, in our industry, a lot of the so-called regulation. Because just now I just talked to one MHB people, like our scanner, they need a certain, like I don't know what kind of the international thing. So when the time you need to do the testing, all about the money. It's all about the money. We also welcome.
See, I want to ask your ambitions. So you've obviously set up this company. You're self-funded. I can understand your business model. You would like to have external funding, but what you would like more is orders coming in.
Yes.
Because you can
yes.
bank those orders basically.
Yes.
Right? So that's your funding model now. But what is your ambition? Where are you taking your company? Are you taking it to exit? Are you taking it to sell? You know, one day Siemens knocks on your door and says, "Hey, you know, we like your technology," or are you here to stay and build a real competitor against the big giants?
Okay, thanks, KJ. This is a very good question. For us, I think honestly, I need to share here. I'm not the founder. I'm just a professional manager. Okay, I represent the company. So our vision and long term, we want to be the leader. We want to be the leader, and like every one of you, you know, or you go to the airport, go to seaport, whatever, you can see the Malaysia product made in Malaysia national brand. So we are not like want to sell the company. We don't want to sell the company because when the time I talk to a lot of people that this is a Malaysian technology, actually I feel proud. Just a feeling to share to you. Before this, I was not working in Malaysia. I was working in Singapore. So this is how the founder pitching me, how he direct me from Singapore back here to help him to set up the company here. Because this is a Malaysian technology, so I have the obligation to grow it and protect the national security sovereignty.
Sorry, just your background, Mr. Lee. Are you in business development or are you in tech? Your background.
I'm in tech. I'm the electronic engineer.
Okay. So just on that question, on that point, you are a very rare species because most people go from here to Singapore. You
Yes.
went the other way.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about, apart from, you know, wanting to develop Malaysian brand and all that, can you tell us a bit about your decision to do that and how we can get more of that reversal?
Actually, this one is like this. When the time the founder pitch me the time, approach me the time, help me to build this because this is a very niche technology. Before I made this kind of the so-called big decision, this was actually 12 years ago. 12 years ago was I in the company. So I also do a study survey what this industry, what for. So I'm thinking this is a very new, and then I have the I have the feeling to come back to help lah, you know.
Do you, I mean, just tagging on that question, do you think, because sometimes when we think about it as policymakers or people who want to be policymakers, we think it's about the salary, it's about the earning. But I wonder whether it's about the challenge. And a lot of people are willing to come back if they feel that the problem that they're solving is big enough for them to feel that sense of purpose, sense of fulfillment. Is that your story?
Yes, because honestly speaking, my time to come back is not 3.3. My time to come back is 2 point something. So still fine. Yeah.
See, maybe one last question from me. We've not spoken about this enough in this session, but I think the opportunity to do so with somebody who's running a tech company. This is Malaysian talent.
Yes, yes, yes.
When we talk about build, buy, and bet on local technology, it has to be premised on the fact that we have the right talent in this country. We managed to get you back, but are you seeing the right kind of talents emerging from our ecosystem? You've invested money in UTM. We've got good science graduates coming up. A lot of them, when they spoke to me when I was at MOSTI, tell me that, you know, I work so hard for my science degree, but I'm not getting jobs that are the same level as my education. Dia tak setimpal dengan kelayakan saya lah, basically. And therefore, they end up doing other things. Or, you know, they tell their younger siblings, don't go into science. It doesn't pay. There's no good job for you anyway. And that's why our STEM ratio is not where we want it to be. can you tell us a little bit about talent that you work with? Are you getting enough talent from the universities? And how young Malaysians can be inspired into going into technology?
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very good question. I think don't talk about how I come back first because there is also some of the reason. Okay, so we talk about two things. So number one is talent retention. So we keep our current talent. The other one is how we direct balik the talent. So this one they may have another family issue, so we don't talk about this. We focus about the talent retention. So actually, I was impressed when I work with the like a lot of the local university like UTM, UCS Science, and also the Thai University. All these university, all the talent are very good. In fact, I was the oldest so-called the tech guy in my company. So the average R&D engineer in my team is around 27 to 28. It's very young and energetic. So this is how we need the so-called the upcoming project for local to feed us, and then we can keep hiring. In fact, I can share something. Currently, the company size of the company is around 100 staff in Malaysia. So this is not the easy to keep so many R&D and also the tech people to keep in the company. So for us, definitely we need to keep the talent. Then we need to give the relevant, the good pay to my staff so that they can keep here. Then the other thing is we always need to come out the innovative so that is the thing that let them to stay. Just like my company, we are invented the next generation technology using the static carbon nanotube X-ray scanner. So that is the thing that a lot of the fresh grad they was excited, then they will come to join us at the end.
Yeah, last question for me because, like I said in my previous remarks, I think it's about the challenge, and clearly your company is part of the solution of doing something really meaningful, deep tech, at the frontier of tech, and that's what a lot of young people get excited about because yes, they can in the short term they might be able to earn bigger bucks in Singapore, but in the long term, the sense of fulfillment, purpose will be at home. And if they
Yes.
can actually build something meaningful, they'll get both anyway, sense of purpose, and they'll get rich if that's something that drives them. So last question from me, Mr. Lee, is around your vision for the company. Maybe tell us in your mind when you go to sleep, when you have sweet dreams, where do you see this company being in say 5 to 10 years?
Okay, in the next 5 to 10 years, I hope to be realistic, I hope we can capture more market in the Southeast Asia region, and then we also can step out. And then also one of the dream that I always tell to my daughters. My daughter every time ask me, Papa, what is your job? What are you doing in the factory? Actually, I'm telling that I'm doing the scanner. So is it the scanner in the airport? I said yes. That's why I said I'm striking very hard to let my daughter and my son to see next time we will come back. Then you see the scanner have the my STI logo, made in Malaysia logo, national brand of the Malaysia logo. That is our scanner. So this is my vision as well. So in terms of the slightly long term, I hope we become a very, very big guy, let the China and also the Western company to pay attention to the Malaysia company. So, there's a Malaysia big tech security company here already.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Big round of applause for our homegrown billion prima, Sindrian Berhad, MyScan. So, Shara, we've got maybe 10 minutes to wrap up before we end our session. I just wanted to spend the last 10 minutes asking you first about, since you've been looking for investment opportunities around Malaysia and around the region in tech companies, not exclusively in tech companies, but also in tech companies, are you seeing a lot more deep tech emerging? And this is I'll qualify or I'll explain my question. When I was at Mosti, I checked the profile of companies that get grants from Cradle and things like that. And I noticed that quite a bit of those companies were companies which were developing platforms, retail platforms, basically platforms to sell online or platforms to move part of their B2B online. And while I think that that's important to support because we want to get people onboarded as much as possible, it's not really deep tech. So I asked them to create a grant for deep tech. And the take-up rate wasn't high, but it was important for us to send a message that government funding is not just for creating platforms, but also for investing in deep tech like scanning equipment, like robotics, like drones. And later we can talk about the drone development plan under Meranti and NTIS. Are you seeing a lot more deep tech companies emerge, especially from Malaysia, or is it still very much the platform investing?
Yeah. So first of all, I actually invest exclusively in tech, KJ. So the fund that I'm with only does tech. So that's what I do every day now. But your question is a very pertinent one. Is Malaysia the source or the originator of a lot of deep tech? And the honest answer is not yet. And we can spend a lot of minutes on why that is. But I think if we're not being overly negative, we have to also respect the fact that the maturity of the ecosystem, and because of our population size, because of GDP growth, because of rising middle class in this region as a whole, B2C plays are always going to be favorites for now. So, platform sort of solutions, consumer products, that's where returns are to be got. However, you're absolutely right. If you want to be an innovation society, innovation country, you have to go to the frontier of technology. And that's not platform stuff anymore, right? People can do that, and there will always be people who do that, but we need more encouraging science to come up from our university, from our research labs, to come up with more deep tech companies. But I will say this, obviously, grudgingly, as a Malaysian, you will obviously not be surprised that it's Singapore where many of these sort of deep tech startups are to be found. But even they...
Okay, just to challenge you on that, I really want to know your observation. Singapore's smaller population, is it, and I'm going to be raw in my questioning, is it simply to do with brain power that they're getting the deep tech right? Do they have better professors? They have better universities? They have better startup companies who are actually more competent with the technology?
More brain power in Singapore per square mile, but they might be Malaysian brains, right? So, it's not because we're inferior brain or inferior talent, but maybe they have a superior ecosystem to pull the best brains from all over the world, not just Malaysia, to be in Singapore, to be at NUS, to be at all these kind of research universities and get the, I don't know how familiar you're with this thing called A-Star, which is this huge program. They've spent billions over more than 10 years.
I've been to A-Star.
You've been to A-Star, and that, so that is billions that are poured government money into building this deep tech ecosystem that has taken more than a decade to come to where it is now. And even now, it's still very early stage companies, KJ. So do we have the patience? Does Malaysia have the patience? Do we have the sort of staying power to put money in, even though the returns we know will come in more than a decade later? And from this A-Star program in Singapore, and I don't want to spend more than 10 more seconds pujing Singapore, but from this A-Star program, they spawned out a lot more early stage deep tech VCs who only do deep tech. And they invest globally, they invest in Singapore, they invest globally, but they are based in Singapore. So they have this whole flywheel effect of capital, of origination of technology, and they import the best brains to come to stay in Singapore.
Another question on funding deep tech. When I asked Cradle and our agencies to focus on deep tech, of course the answer was, no, this is highly risky. Because when you talk about platform, B2C, B2B platforms, I think the returns are a bit more easier to imagine. Deep tech is a huge punt. Do you think the Malaysian funding ecosystem understands and has the appetite for that kind of risk?
I think, like I said at the start, it's about early stage funding. And then it's about preparing our Malaysian companies to go out to get the proper funding at growth rounds. So for example, the fund that I'm with, the growth fund that I'm with, we invested in this company out of Australia. That's called Q Control. They do quantum computing software, and some of the applications has now been to replace GPS, because with geopolitics these days, there are very many GPS denied areas actually. I learned this a few months ago, and slightly worrying. If you and I were to fly to the US or to Europe, there are various places on the way there that are GPS denied. So actually, you need other solutions, and this company comes out with a. So what I'm saying is there is a need for growth stage funding and not education but upskilling of companies and founders to tell your equity story, to find out the problems that you can solve globally. You're not solving, when you do deep tech, you're not solving Malaysian problems. You're solving civilizational world problems. And that's when I talk about ambition. That's when I talk about getting the right funding outside. And I think there are plenty of problems in the world today that there's no reason Malaysian brains can't solve.
I think at this point it's worthwhile highlighting something that I think is quite exciting because it is deep tech or adjacent to deep tech, and it is something that Malaysia has realized is probably we have a competitive advantage in this, and we can accelerate this. And this is the My Drone Tech initiative under Meranti. So under the Malaysian Drone Technology Action Plan, of course, Malaysia. What is Malaysia without action plans? It was launched in September 2022 under MOSTI. So Meranti acts as the coordinating agency and secretariat. What is the use case here? The use case is to develop a national unmanned traffic management system. Obviously, this is relevant for us compared to Singapore because we have a lot of traffic, so they won't be spending time on this. So the UTM system, digital registration of drones, encouraging drones, drone use not just for traffic, but also in agriculture, logistics, emergency response. And not just that, and I like this part of it, it's talent development also. It's not just about the technology, but accrediting remote pilot training organizations. So basically, training drone pilots, which is not an easy thing to do actually. And of course, the regulatory side, which is testing and certifying through Civil Aviation Authority Malaysia, JUPEM, MCMC, and CIRIM. I thought that this was a nice story about building an ecosystem where we're not going after something that we are already way behind neighbors like Singapore and other countries, but something that we have companies who are at the leading edge, Aerodyne and others, and where the use case is
makes sense to us. Singapore doesn't have plantations, they don't have problems with traffic management, like we do, and we double down on this. So I thought this is a perfect example of how we get the right sector.
I think that's right. Although I said we need to be ambitious to solve global problems, but it's one step at a time. We are years behind some other ecosystems in developing this gene tech culture, the ecosystem, like I said, funding that needs to go in universities and research labs. So, even companies, it's not just about government, right? To your point half an hour ago, it's about companies that have the balance sheet. We have incentive for them to pour back into R&D. So those are the things that can be known, that takes a while. On the way there, as we're building blocks, is identifying, to your point, sectors that we have immediate use case for. Right, and I guess that's where you came from when you talk about this drone initiative, and I think if we double down a bit on drone, Diego, you start with Malaysia, but I still go back to this global ambition. This world is getting more and more complicated, and while maybe we don't want to necessarily do drones just for defense, but there's this term now called dual use, which is for commercial use and also military or government use. Right? And drones for surveillance, drones in the battlefields that are happening now, as I'm going to cite the genocide in Gaza, but in the Ukraine and Russian battlefront, it's all drones apparently, right? And this is both drones with payloads and drones for surveillance. And it's not just Malaysia that will need this. And there's no reason why we can't take look in a world that geopolitics will make it more complicated. The term dual use and the term asymmetrical warfare, where a lot of countries maybe of our size would require this kind of drone solutions that we can't think bigger.
No, I think a lot of our drone companies, both hardware and software, already deploying across the world, not just for defense and security purposes, but for oil and gas monitoring pipelines, and actually diagnosing early diagnostics of potential leaks and leakages of those pipelines. I want to bring the discussion to a close by coming back to our obsession with rankings. And I have to say this because the brief for KS for KJ and Shahril Keluar Sekejap today is to talk about why we are upset about the Global Innovation Index. I think it's nice to have high rankings in index. So, I mean, it tells you something.
But I don't think we should be obsessed by rankings, because rankings fluctuate. It goes up and down. It doesn't really tell you the true story of what's happening. I would like us to really focus on real world commercial success. That's really where we see us pushing the frontier of technology development in this country. So more companies like MyScan, more companies that are building technology-based companies that are showing commercial returns, and then the index rankings will come. You have to build the businesses first. You have to build the ecosystem in which the businesses can thrive, from talent development, from regulatory support, from government support, for these companies to take off, and then the rankings will come. So I've always been of the view, don't push the panic button when your ranking slides year this year suddenly goes up this year. Sometimes the index is quite random. There've been there've been a lot of disruptive events which are completely out of our control. Supply chain disruption, COVID, war around the world. So I think the most important thing is, yes, take note of the rankings, but don't be obsessed by it. Focus on the real thing, which is ecosystem development, technology development, and seeing commercial success from our startups.
Yeah, I'll just add to that by saying rankings, if you move up or down marginally, to KJ's point, don't be obsessed about it. Maybe a slightly controversial point for me is, if you move up from 33 to 30, that doesn't mean anything also, because in today's world, you're either number one, number two, or nothing lah. If you are, 12 in the 12 most innovative country, that doesn't really mean anything. You better be number one or number two, otherwise there's a lot more to go, right? So yes, let's not obsess over rankings, but if you are going to obsess, you better shoot for number one, number two, otherwise no real value. Second is, for me to close on my view, is just to wrap things up from my perspective. Ecosystem development, key, talent. This talent piece is what I want to close with, because I think Mr. Lee's point towards the end there is absolutely right. I also maybe suffer from, for a while in the past, the inferiority complex, thinking that our talent's not smart enough or not good enough, and da. It's maybe, there's some truth in some areas where we could do better. But when it comes to technology, when it comes to software developers, when it comes to AI talent, I think we really can claim that we have really good talent. The question now, and this is a generational question, and this is one thing we cannot make a mistake on or cannot miss it. How do we retain them? Or if they go outside, how do we retain the link to Malaysia so that they come back? And this is more than just your traditional brain drain problem or brain gain concept. This is going to be the single most important variable on whether we end up just being a passenger on this AI revolution, or we are one of the drivers of it. And if we are going to be one of the drivers of it, we've got to lean into the thing that we have. The things that we have are the infrastructure layer in terms of the semiconductor, instead of data centers. Okay, that's one part. But the other part that we have is our talent. And instead of just being inferior, or instead of just thinking and giving up, assuming that our ecosystem is just not developed enough yet, we've just got to find ways to make sure either we retain the best talent, we gain them, or we make sure there's a link that at some point, after they go to San Francisco, after they go to Singapore, they will come back to Malaysia. And that's a function of how much support we give them while they're overseas, how much love we give them, how much recognition we give them, and how much meaningful problems that we can offer them to solve when they want to come back home. So those are the things that I would focus on in terms of talent.
I want to wrap things up with some observation on the future of technology and security, especially for Malaysia. I spend a lot of time thinking about our national interest. As someone who will probably end up going back into politics, I always think about how we survive over the next 50 years and the national interest. I think at no point have we been confronted with excitement in technology than today, especially with the development of large language models. But actually, we're also confronted with an existential moment, whether or not we can survive and whether or not we can remain independent. Mr. Lee mentioned just now that Malaysia stands at the sweet spot between two big powers, between two geopolitical rivals. And ideally, we want to stay in that sweet spot. We don't want to have to choose sides. And I think what we are talking about today, local technology development, is not just about supporting companies from Malaysia in introducing technology, but actually having that resilience to be able to survive and not having to choose one or the other. And I'll explain why. If the technology today is being weaponized, and you can see this by policies from the big countries. America will not allow for certain semiconductor chips to be sold to China. China develops its own large language models, which are based on its historical and its information that it feeds, DeepSeek and other information models like that. Now, if Malaysia is reliant on one or the other, and we don't have our own capabilities, let's just take AI for instance, and one day one of the countries decides to shut down access to large language models for Malaysia, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's DeepSeek, whether it's any of the big American tech or Chinese companies, then we're in serious trouble. So I think in an age where technology has been weaponized, we have to take this seriously. At the recent ASEAN AI conference, Shahril mentioned just now about our capabilities for AI and software development. It's there already. You can see University Malaya and YTL developing our own large language model. It's a start. It's a start to say that we have technological sovereignty in Malaysia. That means we don't have to rely on other countries. If countries shut us off, we are able to respond with our own local technology. So what we're doing here today is actually not just about having companies producing deep tech. It's about surviving in a future where technology is weaponized and which will continue to be weaponized. And this is clear. It is clear that countries will favor their own companies, will favor themselves, will sell other people a lower version of technology. They won't sell you the best. And this has been seen over the last many, many decades where even in arms procurement, America is not going to sell you the top jet fighters. They're going to sell you that one rung below. And this continues now with chips. It continues now with other hardware. It continues now with other software. So to me, this is not just about MOSTI. This is not just about the NTIS. It's actually a more fundamental problem of survival and the national interest in the future. If you don't get this right, then you will risk having to choose. You will risk having to be reliant, and you will risk not being a serious, independent, sovereign player in the future. So we hope that the agenda of MOSTI, the agenda of Meranti, the agenda of NTIS continues with the message that it's more than just building companies. It's actually ensuring the long-term resilience of Malaysia and our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.